So last season we covered an extremely strong Void Titan build that took advantage of Wave Splitter and the new build crafting system, and it quickly turned into one of my favorite builds in the game. Now in Season of the Deep, Void Titan saw a handful of buffs to different aspects of their subclass, and Bungie reworked a ton of underused exotics, meaning we have some great new options to play with. So today we'll be updating our Void Titan build for Season of the Deep. This build can counter every type of champion in the game, while also applying Weaken and Volatile to every enemy that we see. My name is Gray. If you enjoyed today's video, a like and sub is greatly appreciated. Now let's get into it. Starting off with our exotic armor piece, we're going to be using the Second Chance exotic arms. This exotic just got a really nice rework this season, and they're honestly really strong now. These have the perk Myrmidon's Reach, where we gain a second charge for our shield throw melee. Our shield throw can now weaken targets, which applies a 15% debuff to them, on top of the fact that our shield throw will now also stun anti-barrier champions. Whenever you stun a barrier champion, your shield throw also gets instantly refunded. Now I know the shield throw isn't necessarily the strongest melee ability in the game, but when paired with the rest of our subclass, it gives us a ton of utility for ad clear on top of that anti-barrier functionality. We can pair this with the controlled demolition aspect on our subclass, which makes it so anytime a target is hit by any of our void abilities, they instantly become volatile. These two things combined make it so our shield throw melee is now applying both the weaken and volatile debuffs to anything that it hits. Our second aspect is offensive bulwark. This makes it so anytime we have an overshield, our grenade recharges faster, we have bonus melee damage, and melee final blows extend the duration of our overshield. When we pair this aspect with the Devour buff, which grants grenade energy, we can regenerate our grenade extremely fast, which allows us to put more of our stats into strength as opposed to discipline. In all of this gameplay, I only have 30 discipline, and I'm still getting my grenade back every 20 seconds or so. Now moving on to our fragments, each of these are deliberately chosen to make the build as fluid as possible. First will be Echo of Harvest, where defeating weakened targets creates an Orb of Power and a Void Breach. Our shield throw melee and our grenade will weaken targets, allowing us to create orbs and void breaches constantly. Second will be Echo of Starvation. Picking up an Orb of Power or a Void Breach grants Devour. Devour heals us to full health on every final blow while the buff is active, as well as restoring grenade energy at the same time. Third will be Echo of Undermining, which allows our grenades to weaken enemies as well, and keep in mind that thanks to controlled demolition, they will also be made volatile at the same time. Finally, we have Echo of Instability, where grenade final blows grant our void weapons volatile rounds. This full setup allows both our melee and grenade abilities to apply weaken and make enemies volatile, while simultaneously creating endless orbs of power and void breaches to fuel our Devour buff, the Wave Splitter exotic trace rifle, and all of our armor mods. I recommend a stat split of 100 resilience and 100 strength. Our subclass aspects and armor mods will allow us to form a near perfect ability loop, and after all my testing, I found this to be the most optimal stat split. Before we get into the full armor mod breakdown, I do want to talk about this seasonal artifact, as we have some very powerful void perks that take the build even further. But don't worry, as none of them are required for this build to function, they just add another layer. Starting off quickly, be sure to take Overload Trace Rifle for Wave Splitter, and then authorize mods Void and authorize mods Melee. These will help us out later. Moving along, we take Unto the Breach, which will create a Void Breach whenever we defeat a Void debuff target of any kind. We then take Protective Breach, and this one's honestly huge. It grants us an Overshield every single time we pick up a Void Breach. This ties directly to our aspects, making sure we always have reduced grenade cooldown thanks to offensive bulwark. Finally, we take Supernova, which makes our next source of void damage apply the weakened debuff after picking up a Void Breach. While none of these are necessary, they do turn the build into an absolute monster, so be sure to have them active while you're using this build. Wave Splitter is of course our main weapon of choice here, especially with Overload Trace Rifles this season, but I also like to take a Chill Clip Fusion in my kinetic slot for unstoppable champions as well. This allows us to deal with all three types of champions at any time, which is something that not a lot of builds can do. Before we get into the full armor mod breakdown, there is a dim loadout link in the description that will set all of this up for you with a single click. If you made it this far and choose to stop watching here to use that dim link, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated before you go. On our helmet, we take Void Siphon for orb generation, Special Ammo Finder, and Powerful Friends. On our arms, we take 1 copy of Firepower and 2 copies of Momentum Transfer. This allows our grenade to generate orbs and allows us to use our grenade to regenerate melee energy for our shield throw. This may seem counterintuitive with Second Chance being the center of our build, but shield throw isn't often landing the actual final blow on targets and is more so used as a utility for debuffing enemies. This mod setup makes things much more fluid. You just gotta trust me. On our chest, we take Charged Up for additional armor charge slots, Void Reserves for Wave Splitter, and whatever resist mod you'd like. For our legs, we take 2 copies of Void Weapon Surge for a 17% damage increase at nearly all times, and Invigoration to reduce our melee cooldown on orb pickup. Finally, on our class item, we take Time Dilation for longer armor charges, Reaper for orb generation after dropping our Barricade, and Outreach to further reduce our melee cooldown as well. All of this together forms one of my new all-time favorite builds in Destiny 2 that's incredibly fun to take just about anywhere in the game. It's great for countering any type of champion and has great damage output as well as massive ad clear and debuff potential as well. As always, if you enjoyed the video, a like and sub greatly helps me out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.